From the very first day I met my future mother-in-law, I felt it. Not hostility, not anger, but something colder. Absence. She stood in the doorway of her living room when my fiancé brought me home for the first time, her hands neatly folded in front of her, her smile fixed and polite. She hugged me lightly, the way you hug someone you don't intend to remember. "You're pretty," she said, pulling back to look at me. Very confident. I didn't know then that confident was not a compliment coming from her. It was a warning. I spent that entire evening trying to be smaller without realizing I was doing it. I laughed softly. I chose my words carefully. I helped clear dishes without being asked. I thanked her repeatedly for the meal, for the invitation, and for the air in the room. And still she watched me, not like a curious mother meeting her son's partner, like a woman assessing a threat. Whenever I spoke, she tilted her head slightly, as if weighing my value. Whenever I expressed an opinion, she smiled slowly, then redirected the conversation somewhere safer, somewhere I didn't exist. "You'll learn how things work in this family," she said later that night, squeezing my hand a little too tightly. "Marriage changes women." I smiled back, unsure why my stomach tightened. As months passed, her disapproval never announced itself loudly. It arrived in quiet ways. She corrected how I folded laundry when we visited, adjusted how I arranged plates on the table, commented on my tone when I spoke to my fiancé. "You're very expressive," she'd say. "Men don't like too much intensity." She spoke often about sacrifice, about patience, about how love meant enduring. And every time she spoke, her eyes lingered on me, not lovingly but expectantly, like she was waiting for me to shrink into the version of woman she could tolerate. I tried. God knows I tried. I dressed more conservatively around her. I bit my tongue when she interrupted me. I told myself that once we were married, things would settle. That she'd accept me once she saw I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't understand then that permanence was exactly what she feared. The first time I realized she didn't want me there was subtle. We were planning the wedding, sitting at the dining table. Venues, flowers, guest lists spread between us. She nodded along politely until I suggested something small, something harmless. "I was thinking of a winter ceremony," I said. "Soft colors, candlelight." She paused, smiled. "That's not how we do weddings in this family." The sentence landed heavier than it should have. Not I don't like that. No, that's not my preference. But we. And in that moment, I understood that I wasn't included in that word. When the wedding dress arrived, everything shifted. I didn't notice it at first. I was too consumed by my own joy. The way the fabric fell perfectly. The way the lace hugged my arms like it belonged there. The way I finally saw myself not as someone asking to be chosen, but as someone already standing in her place. I brought the dress to their house because she insisted. "It's safer here," she said. I'd never forgive myself if something happened to it. She watched me hang it carefully in the guest room closet. Her eyes traced the length of it, from the delicate neckline to the soft train. She didn't smile. Instead, she inhaled slowly, then said, "It's very bold." Again that word. That night, I overheard her talking to my fiancé in the kitchen. "She's taking too much space," she whispered. "Marriage should be about blending in, not standing out." I stood frozen in the hallway, listening. That was the first time I understood something I wish I'd known sooner. She didn't hate me because I was cruel or careless or unworthy. She hated me because I was visible. From that moment on, the atmosphere changed. She hovered near the guest room more often, asked unnecessary questions about the dress, suggested alterations that would make it simpler, more appropriate, and less distracting. "You don't want to embarrass yourself," she said once, softly. "People notice these things." I nodded, smiled, told myself I was overthinking. But deep down, something whispered a warning I wasn't ready to hear. I didn't know then that she wasn't trying to change the dress. She was deciding whether it deserved to exist at all. That night, the night before the wedding, I went to bed with a strange weight in my chest. Not fear. Do not panic. Instinct. The kind that comes too late. And somewhere down the hall, a woman who had never made space for me finally decided to take it all back. By the time the wedding planning reached its final weeks, I had learned how to read her moods the way sailors read the sky. A tight smile meant disapproval. Silence meant punishment. Kindness, sudden and excessive, meant something was coming. She never raised her voice. That was the most dangerous part. Everything she did could be explained away as concern, tradition, or love. Anyone watching from the outside would have sworn she was generous, involved, and even selfless. Only I felt the pressure. It pressed against my ribs when I entered a room, sat on my shoulders when I spoke, followed me like a shadow I couldn't escape. Wedding planning brought us closer together than ever, and that closeness became its own kind of test. She insisted on attending every fitting, every meeting, every discussion. If I tried to excuse myself, she smiled sweetly and said, "Oh no, dear, I want to be involved. This is my son's wedding too." Her son's, not ours. She corrected vendors when they addressed me, redirected decisions back to herself, questioned my choices until I doubted them. "Are you sure that's what you want? Have you thought this through?" Traditionally, brides don't do it that way. Each question was soft, reasonable, impossible to challenge without sounding defensive. So I stopped challenging them. The dress became her quiet obsession. She never touched it, but she found excuses to mention it. "Did you hang it properly? Fabric like that wrinkles easily. Wouldn't it be safer if I checked on it occasionally?" I caught her once standing in the doorway of the guest room, staring at the closed closet. She didn't jump when she noticed me. She smiled. "I was just thinking about how stressful weddings are," she said. "Sometimes things don't go as planned." The words stayed with me long after she walked away. My fiancé noticed some of it. Not enough. When I mentioned how tense I felt around his mother, he brushed it aside. "She just wants everything to be perfect," he said. "She's old-fashioned. She'll relax after the wedding." After. That word again. Always later. Always postponed. I wanted to believe him. I wanted peace. I wanted to arrive at the wedding without friction. So I swallowed my discomfort and told myself love required compromise. I didn't realize I was the only one compromising. The night before the wedding arrived too quickly. The house buzzed with preparation. Bags packed. Schedules finalized. Guests arriving. Laughter echoed down the halls, but it felt distant, like sound traveling through water. I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion. In the guest room, I stood in front of the closet one last time and opened it slowly. The dress hung there, untouched. Perfect. I ran my fingers lightly over the fabric, feeling the coolness beneath my skin. I whispered a promise to myself that no matter what happened tomorrow, I would walk forward with my head high. I closed the closet door gently. I didn't lock it. I didn't think I needed to. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake listening to the house settle. Pipes ticking. Floorboards creaking. A door opening somewhere down the hall, then closing again. At some point, footsteps passed my room. They paused, then continued. My heart beat faster, but I told myself I was imagining things. Nerves. Stress. The kind of anxiety every bride feels. I turned onto my side and forced my eyes shut. Sometime later, a smell pulled me back from sleep. Sharp. Acrid. Wrong. It didn't belong in a house full of clean sheets and fresh flowers. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then my eyes opened, and my body understood before my mind could. Something was burning. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, the smell growing stronger with every breath. And down the hallway, unseen but undeniable, a decision was already being carried out. The smell grew stronger with every second. It wasn't the soft, comforting scent of candles or incense. It was harsh, chemical, and sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. My heart began to race as my body slipped fully awake, panic crawling up my spine before my thoughts could catch up. I swung my legs off the bed and stood there for a moment, listening. The house was silent, too silent. No voices, no movement, just the faint hum of electricity and that unmistakable smell of something being destroyed. I stepped into the hallway barefoot, the floor cold beneath my feet. The scent led me forward, pulling me like a thread I couldn't ignore. With every step, the air thickened, and my chest tightened as if it already knew what my mind was trying to deny. Halfway down the hall, I saw it. Light. A faint, flickering glow seeping out from beneath the guest room door. My heart slammed against my ribs. "No," I whispered, though I didn't yet know what I was begging for. I rushed forward and pushed the door open. The room was filled with smoke. Not thick enough to blind me, but heavy enough to make my eyes water instantly. My gaze dropped to the floor before I even registered the rest of the room. The dress was there. My wedding dress. It lay crumpled on the bathroom tiles like something discarded, the once ivory fabric blackened and curling in on itself. The lace sleeves I had traced with my fingers hours earlier were melted, fused together into something unrecognizable. The hem was burned through, the edges jagged and brittle. It didn't look ruined. It looked executed. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I honestly thought my body might give out entirely, that I would collapse right there and never stand again. And then I saw her. My mother-in-law stood near the sink, a small flame flickering in her hand. A lighter. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't rushing to put anything out. She wasn't even startled to see me. She turned slowly, as if she had been expecting me all along. "Oh," she said calmly. "You're awake." The flame clicked off. The room went eerily still. "What did you do?" I asked. The words came out thin, almost childish. I barely recognized my own voice. She glanced down at the dress, then back at me, her expression carefully arranged into concern. "It was an accident," she said. "I was lighting a candle. I didn't realize how close it was. A candle." I looked around the bathroom. There was no candle, no holder, no wax, nothing. The closet door stood wide open, the hanger broken on the floor beside it, the metal twisted as if ripped down with force. My hands began to shake. "You moved it," I said quietly. She sighed, as though I were the one being unreasonable. "You're tired," she replied. "You're emotional. Tomorrow is a big day." Tomorrow. The word landed like a slap. I stepped closer, my eyes burning from the smoke and something much worse. The closer I got, the clearer the damage became. There was no saving it, no repairing it, no pretending this could be fixed with time or money. Months of anticipation, years of dreaming, gone. "I trusted you," I whispered. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, her mask slipped. Not anger, not guilt, relief. "I told you," she said softly. "This dress wasn't appropriate. Maybe this is a sign." A sign. My knees nearly buckled. I don't remember screaming, but suddenly my throat burned and my chest hurt, and the sound tearing out of me didn't feel human. Lights flicked on down the hall. Doors opened. Footsteps thundered toward us. She stepped back immediately, pressing a hand to her chest as if startled. "I don't know what happened," she said loudly, just as my fiancé burst into the room. I was trying to help. Help. The room filled with voices. Confusion. Questions. But my eyes stayed locked on the dress. Because in that moment, something else burned too. Trust. Safety. The illusion that I was welcome. As the smoke drifted toward the ceiling and alarms finally screamed, one thought settled cold and heavy in my mind. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. And I had just received it. The smoke alarm wouldn't stop screaming. It pierced the room again and again. A sharp, mechanical sound that made it impossible to think. Someone rushed in to silence it, and suddenly the house was filled with movement, voices overlapping, feet shuffling, questions flying in every direction. But I stood frozen. The dress lay on the floor between us like evidence no one wanted to examine too closely. My fiancé knelt beside it first. He touched the fabric carefully, as if afraid it might still be hot, his face draining of color as he realized what he was looking at. "What happened?" he asked. His voice cracked. Before I could answer, his mother stepped forward. "I don't know," she said softly. "I came to check on the dress because I was worried it wasn't hung properly. I must have knocked something over. There was a candle lit earlier. There it was again. The candle." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words tangled inside me. My throat felt tight, my chest hollow. I looked around the room, silently begging someone, anyone, to notice the things that didn't add up. There was no candle, no wax, no soot trail except where the dress lay. But no one was looking. "She didn't mean to," my fiancé said after a moment, rubbing his face. "It was an accident." The sentence felt like a verdict. I stared at him. "You saw it," I said. "Look at it. This didn't just happen." He avoided my eyes. "She wouldn't do this on purpose," he replied. Why would she? Why would she? That question hovered in the room, unanswered and uncomfortable, and everyone seemed eager to push it away. Relatives crowded the doorway, whispering among themselves. Poor thing, someone murmured, not to me but to her. She must be devastated. Devastated. I was standing right there. My mother-in-law dabbed at her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. Her breathing hitched just enough to draw sympathy. She didn't look at me once. I feel terrible, she said. I only wanted to help. I'd do anything to fix this. Anything, except tell the truth. I tried again. She asked about the dress all week, I said, my voice shaking. She kept insisting on checking on it. She was standing in the hallway earlier tonight. The room grew quiet. For a moment, I thought, maybe now they'll listen. But then she sighed. She's under so much stress, she said gently. Weddings do that. I remember feeling overwhelmed too. The attention shifted instantly. Concern turned toward me. Someone suggested I sit down. Another offered water. A third told me I was probably just overtired. I realized, with a cold clarity, what was happening. They weren't listening because they had already decided. My fiancé put a hand on my shoulder. We'll figure something out, he said. Maybe there's a backup dress. Or we can delay. Delay. The word felt like another loss. This wasn't just about fabric and lace. This was about being believed. About being protected. About knowing the person I was marrying would stand beside me when it mattered. He did. Later, when the house finally quieted and the ruined dress had been carried away, licked in inconvenience, I sat alone on the edge of the bed. No one came to check on me. No apology. No explanation. No accountability. Down the hall, I heard my mother-in-law laughing softly with a relative, her voice light, almost relieved. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. I stopped crying. I stopped hoping. I stopped expecting fairness. Because I understood now, this was not an accident that destroyed my wedding dress. It was the opening move in a war I never agreed to fight. And whether they believed me or not, I would remember everything. The morning of the wedding, the house hummed with false cheer. Everyone moved with precision, brushing off tension as if rehearsed. I slipped into the replacement dress they had purchased in a panic. It wasn't mine. It didn't feel like me. But it fit perfectly in everyone else's eyes. They would call it elegant, charming, graceful. I hated it. Every fiber reminded me of what had been stolen. Every seam a reminder that I was powerless in that moment. I walked past her in the hallway. She smiled. Sweet. Controlled. Proud. I returned the smile, soft and measured. Inside, I was already planning. The ceremony began. Guests gathered. Cameras flashed. I held my fiancé's arm and went through the motions like an actress who had memorized the wrong script. The vows felt hollow. The flowers smelled faintly of betrayal, and the music that should have lifted me instead pressed me down like a weight. And all the while I watched her, every twitch of her fingers, every micro-expression, every glance at me. Her satisfaction radiated in waves. She thought she had broken me. She had no idea she had just set the stage for what was coming. I survived that day not because of love, not because of forgiveness. I survived because I understood something crucial. Power is quiet. Patience is louder than anger. Marriage brought me closer to her than I ever wanted. At family dinners, I observed every nuance. How she directed conversation, gently bending people to her will without raising her voice. How she spread whispers that framed her as thoughtful, concerned, and caring. How she took credit for everything and absorbed every compliment. I realized she had weaponized her own reputation. If I wanted revenge, it couldn't be explosive. It couldn't be overt. It had to be invisible, strategic, slow, perfect. I began keeping a record. Every comment she made that contradicted reality. Every subtle threat disguised as advice. Every act of manipulation. I watched how others responded, who believed her immediately, who doubted her quietly, who would question her if given the chance. I started making plans, quietly, not for immediate satisfaction, not for instant gratification, but for complete dismantling. She had been careful, thinking she controlled the narrative. She didn't know I was learning her language. I was cataloging every weakness, every crack, and soon, every false smile would cost her. The fire of the wedding dress had burned more than fabric, it had ignited clarity. The lesson was simple. She could destroy, yes, but I could outlive her influence. And in time, I would make her wish she had never touched me or my dress. The first rule I gave myself was simple: never let her see the knife. If she believed she had broken me, she would relax. If she thought I was small, grateful, forgiving, she would grow careless. So I became exactly what she expected. I smiled more. I spoke less. I thanked her often. At family gatherings, I praised her cooking. I complimented her taste. I asked for her advice in front of others. Every word fed the version of herself she loved the most, the generous matriarch, the woman everyone trusted. She basked in it. "You're finally settling in," she told me one afternoon, her voice warm with satisfaction. "Marriage changes women." I nodded, lowering my eyes. Inside, I memorized the moment. I began planting nothing that could be traced back to me. Instead, I asked questions. "Did you really say that? Is that how you meant it? Oh, I thought you said something else." Small things. Innocent things. I watched as confusion flickered across faces when her stories didn't line up. I noticed when people began asking her to repeat herself. When her certainty wavered just slightly, she laughed it off at first. But laughter changed tone when it was repeated too often. I started involving others without involving them at all. A casual mention here. A gentle reminder there. Never accusations. Only observations. Maybe she forgot. She's had so much on her plate. I worry she's tired. Concern is a powerful disguise. Soon, people began watching her the way I once did. At home, I remained polite, respectful, unthreatening, but I stopped reacting. Her comments lost their impact when they no longer pierced. Her silences meant nothing when I filled them with my own peace. When she tried to correct me, I thanked her and did things my way anyway. That unsettled her. Control requires resistance to feel alive. One evening, I passed her in the hallway. She studied me longer than usual, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "You've changed," she said. I smiled. "I learned," I replied. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't need to. Because somewhere beneath her calm exterior, she felt it, the shift. The loss of certainty. The sense that the game she thought she'd won was no longer being played by her rules. She had burned my dress. I was burning her illusion of power. Slowly, carefully, and she still didn't see the fire. I noticed the change before anyone said it out loud. It was subtle at first, the way conversations paused when she entered a room. The slight hesitation before people agreed with her. The way her words were met with polite nods instead of instant affirmation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just hesitation. She felt it too. Her voice began to rise just a fraction higher when she spoke, as if trying to anchor authority that no longer held. She repeated herself more often, corrected others more sharply. The sweetness that once flowed so effortlessly now had an edge beneath it. She blamed stress. She blamed age. She never blamed herself. At a family dinner, she told a story she had told many times before, about how difficult my wedding planning had been, how she had stepped in to save the day. I didn't interrupt. I just smiled and said, "That's interesting." I remember it differently. The table went quiet. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The silence did the work for me. Later that evening, someone pulled me aside. "She can be intense," they said carefully. "I didn't realize before." I nodded, as if hearing it for the first time. "I think she means well," I replied. That phrase again. Means well. It disarms people. Makes them comfortable saying what they've already begun to suspect. At home, her behavior shifted. She watched me more closely now, asked more questions, tried to regain footing by inserting herself into my decisions again. But it was too late. I had stopped seeking approval. Months later, the house she once ruled with quiet authority felt different. People treated her when she offered advice. I thanked her and ignored it. When she criticized, I acknowledged and moved on. When she tried to provoke, I stayed calm. Nothing frightens a manipulator like indifference. One afternoon, she confronted me quietly in the kitchen. "You don't seem to need me anymore," she said. The statement was loaded. A test. A trap. I met her eyes and smiled. "I never did," I replied gently. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she had no response. That night, I lay awake thinking about the dress. Not with sadness, with clarity. She had believed destruction would make me smaller. Instead, it had stripped away my fear. And now, as the room shifted and alliances realigned, she was beginning to understand something she never expected. She hadn't destroyed me. She had created her own reckoning. The first person to confront her wasn't me. That was the most satisfying part. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind she once ruled effortlessly. Family gathered for a casual visit, laughter filling the living room, the usual rhythm she relied on to stay in control. She told a story, a small one, a harmless one, except it contradicted something she had said the week before. Someone noticed. They asked a question. She corrected herself too quickly. And just like that, the room shifted. I watched from across the room, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I didn't speak. I didn't react. I let the moment breathe. Confusion lingered in the air. She laughed too loudly, brushed it off too fast, changed the subject too sharply, and people remembered. Later, another conversation, another inconsistency, then another. Not lies big enough to explode, but enough to crack trust. Her greatest strength had always been certainty. The absolute confidence with which she spoke made people stop questioning. Now, certainty was gone. She noticed me watching. Our eyes met. For the first time, I saw something new there. Fear. Not loud. Not dramatic. Controlled. Contained. She pulled me aside that evening. "You've been saying things about me," she accused quietly. I tilted my head. "What things?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She couldn't say it. Because I hadn't. She began unraveling after that. Calling people too often. Explaining things no one asked about. Revisiting old conversations, desperate to clarify moments that didn't need clarification. The woman who once controlled every narrative was now trapped inside them. One night, my fiancé finally spoke the words I'd been waiting for. "I think my mother lies sometimes," he said. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded. "I think she believes her own version," I replied. And that was enough. I returned to the memory of the dress, not with anger, but with resolve. She had burned something precious to assert power. Now, power was leaving her quietly, piece by piece. And the most painful part, she couldn't accuse me without exposing herself. The truth was no longer whispering. It was waiting. It didn't happen in a dramatic explosion. There were no shouting matches, no public humiliations, no arrests. That was never my style. True power, the kind that lasts, doesn't need fireworks. It works quietly, invisibly, until the moment everyone realizes the rules have changed. I watched her carefully, day by day, week by week. Every meeting, every family gathering, every small interaction became part of a pattern I was memorizing, cataloging, and dismantling. She tried to maintain her control, of course. She smiled at others, corrected minor errors, spread stories of her generosity. But her voice had lost weight. Her confidence had small fissures. People began to doubt. They hesitated before following her instructions. Friends and relatives, once loyal to her unquestioningly, started asking questions. Quiet, hesitant questions, but questions nonetheless. And when she finally confronted me alone one evening, thinking she could intimidate me into silence, I was ready. "You've been plotting against me," she said, her voice low but trembling. I looked at her calmly enough to make her doubt herself. "I've been observing," I said. "I've been waiting. And I've been letting people see exactly who you are. That's all." Her hands shook. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried to find a counter, a weapon, an excuse. Nothing came. After that evening, the change was visible to everyone. The subtle cracks I had created began widening naturally. She would tell a story, and someone would quietly point out a discrepancy. She would offer advice, and it would be ignored. Her subtle manipulations that once worked like clockwork now failed repeatedly. I never touched her possessions, never spread rumors, never attacked her directly. I simply let the truth, the quiet truth she had always ignored, follow her like a shadow that could not be escaped. The final piece of revenge was the one she could not repair, the one she never even suspected: the dress. Whenever someone mentioned my wedding, or the wedding dress, I answered calmly. She burned it. No dramatics. No tears. Just a fact. And every time I said it, her expression tightened, her confidence faltered, her carefully curated image cracked just a little more. The thing she thought she had destroyed, the symbol of my joy, my future, my power, had become my weapon. The very act of her cruelty, once meant to diminish me, had empowered me. Differently, invitations she extended were no longer met with automatic compliance. Her suggestions were questioned. Her words weighed less than ever before. And I moved through the world unshaken, stronger, smarter, more certain than I had ever been. She had taught me everything I needed to know about power, about patience, about revenge. And I had used it to survive and to thrive. The wedding dress was gone, but what it had given me, clarity, focus, and the knowledge that I didn't need anyone's approval, was permanent. I didn't ruin her with anger. I didn't destroy her in a fit of vengeance. I outlived her influence, quietly dismantled her control, and let her see, slowly, that she could no longer define anyone's story but her own. She had burned my dress. I had burned her illusion of power, and that was the revenge that truly mattered.